The last person executed by the state of New York was Eddie Lee Mays. 1962 saw his conviction for first-degree robbery and murder. At the time of his execution, Mays was just 34 years old. On March 15, 1929, Mays was born in Rosenberg, North Carolina. Eddie was the youngest of 5 children, and when he was 6 months old, his father left the family to go to prison in Baltimore for murder. When he was 14, Mays left school and worked odd jobs in his hometown for several months. After that, he moved to Baltimore, where he first appeared on a police blotter in 1945. After being detained for theft, Mays was charged with assault after cutting his live-in girlfriend with a razor. He was imprisoned for 6 months before returning to North Carolina. Mays slashed a man during a fight in 1951 and was fined $10 for the assault. A month later, he went back to Baltimore, but after killing a guy, he was detained again and transported back to North Carolina. After entering a guilty plea to manslaughter, Mays was imprisoned for almost 7 years before being released in 1958. Following his discharge, Mays traveled to New York City. He was found guilty of felonious assault there for cutting a man during a dispute. He received a suspended sentence of 3 years, with his probation expiring in January 1961. On March 23, 1961, Mays, along with 2 accomplices, Jose Sanchez Fernandez, 30, and David Johnson, 34, broke into the Friendly Tavern, located at 1403 Fifth Avenue in East Harlem. Mays gave the proprietor and customers the order to place cash on the bar. But Mays was infuriated with Maria Marini, 31, who witnesses claimed was too slow to comply. He killed her at the scene by pressing a .38 caliber handgun to her forehead and pulling the trigger after discovering her purse was empty. During the heist, the group took $275 from the bartender and a number of customers. Manuel Guerriero, Mays' attorney, said in a 1988 interview that he and other defense attorneys had persuaded the prosecution to reach a settlement that would have reduced Mays' charge to second-degree murder, sparing his life. Mays, though, declared that he would rather be put to death. During Mays' trial, the jury was informed that he was a member of a group that had carried out 52 robberies in the span of 6 weeks. Reporters were told that he would prefer to fry than serve his entire life in prison. The jury returned a guilty verdict of first-degree murder on Mays after 90 minutes of deliberation. After deliberating for 20 more minutes, they declined to offer clemency. Therefore, Mays was sentenced to death. Robert Sauer, a composer, served as a juror in his trial. Sanchez Fernandez and Johnson were given life sentences. Johnson was employed in the Bronx in 1983 after being granted parole in 1976. Following his 1977 parole, Sanchez Fernandez passed away the following year from brain cancer. Accompanied by a Protestant chaplain, Mays entered the execution chamber at 10:01 p.m. on August 15, 1963, and was strapped into the electric chair. 3 minutes later, at 10:04 p.m., he was declared dead after being electrocuted. He didn't have any final words to share with the warden or witnesses. Mays would be the final victim of Old Sparky, the electric chair at Sing Sing prison in New York State. Dow Hover was state electrician. Since 1890, the electric chair has served as the only means of execution available in the state since hanging was outlawed in 1888. The death penalty was abolished in the state of New York in 1965, with the exception of situations in which a police officer was killed. The state even extended the death penalty statute in 1995, but the legislature never completely abolished it. However, decisions made by the Supreme Court in Furman v. Georgia in 1972 and the New York Court of Appeals in People v. Laval in 2004 prevented any more executions. In the years prior to Mays' execution, there were several famous cases for which the perpetrators were executed in New York. Just before Mays, in 1963, Frederick Charles Wood was put to death on March 21st. Starting at age 14, he killed 5 individuals in New York between 1926 and 1960. For his two killings, Wood, a lifelong criminal who showed no remorse for his crimes, was given the death penalty and put to death at Sing Sing prison. There was also Leroy Keith. During robberies in Ohio and New York, he killed 3 individuals. He was first given 2 death sentences in Ohio. After being granted parole, he killed 2 more people before being swiftly executed at Sing Sing in 1959. Angelo Lamarca was executed in 1958 for kidnapping and murdering Peter Weinberger, an infant. On July 4, 1956, Peter Weinberger was taken hostage for ransom while he was just 1 month old. Due to the circumstances surrounding the kidnapping and the victim's family, Weinberger was not from an affluent or well-known family like many ransom victims were. The case became well known across the country. Following an investigation, 31-year-old Angelo John Lamarca was taken into custody and later admitted to having abducted Peter Weinberger and abandoned him because of his growing debts and other financial issues. Even though Lamarca claimed to have left Weinberger alive, authorities discovered that he had died of suffocation, with exposure and malnourishment playing a role. Between 1953 and 1954, John Francis Jack Roche, an American serial killer, burglar, and rapist, killed at least 4 individuals in the Yorkville section of eastern Manhattan. After being apprehended, Roche acknowledged being involved in 2 more murders for which someone else had previously been found guilty. As a result, one of those convictions was reversed. Roche was found guilty of killing 14-year-old Dorothy Westwater, given the death penalty, and put to death in Sing Sing in 1956. Federal officials in New York executed gangster Gerhard Arthur Puff for the murder of a federal agent. Puff, at 13, arrived in the United States on June 6, 1927, at Ellis Island on the SS Columbus from Bremen. He, along with his mother and brother, who was 5 years old, were born in Dresden, Germany. He was a naturalized citizen in 1934 after the family relocated to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, but by 1940 he was a prisoner at the Wisconsin State Prison in Waupun. He traveled from Kansas City to Manhattan in 1952 alongside his 17-year-old wife, Annie Laurie. His bank robbery career had earned him a spot on the FBI's 10 most wanted list by this point. FBI agents were waiting to take him into custody shortly after he arrived at the Congress Hotel, located at 19 West 69th Street. He made his way to the first floor, passing the stairs where FBI agent Joseph John Brock, 44, was assigned. Puff ran into Brock, gave him 2 gunshot wounds to the chest, and stole the officer's weapon. Then Puff shot again at approaching agents as he zigzagged through the hotel lobby with a gun in each hand. Puff was urged to turn himself in by agents outside the hotel. Puff fired back, taking multiple shots before fainting in the street. After receiving medical attention at a hospital, he was brought to Bellevue Prison. Brock was sent to a hospital where he was declared dead not long after arriving. Married couple Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were found guilty of espionage for the Soviet Union, giving them access to top-secret data about American radar, sonar, jet propulsion engines, and nuclear weapon designs. They were put to death by the U.S. federal government in 1953 in Sing Sing. They were the first civilian Americans to be executed for such a crime and the first to be executed in a time of peace. For many years, a large number of people, including Michael and Robert Meeropol, the sons of the Rosenbergs, maintained that Julius and Ethel were just victims of Cold War hysteria and had no intention of spying on their nation. Following the collapse of the Soviet Union, the U.S. government began to declassify information about them. This material seemed to include a variety of decoded Soviet cables that described Julius's role as a courier and recruiter for the Soviets, as well as details about Ethel's role as an accessory, helping to enlist her brother David in the spy ring and performing secretarial duties like typing up documents that Julius later sent to the Soviets. Serial killers Martha Jewel Beck and Raymond Martinez Fernandez were also convicted together for their crimes. They were accused of killing up to 20 victims during a spree between 1947 and 1949. They were found guilty of one murder and are known to have murdered two more. Fernandez and Beck entered notoriety as the Lonely Hearts Killers following their 1949 arrest and prosecution for serial killings. They met their innocent victims through personal advertisements placed in a newspaper Lonely Hearts columns. They were executed at Sing Sing Prison on March 8, 1951. Since June 24, 2004, the New York State death penalty statute has been declared unconstitutional by the New York Court of Appeals. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.